Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for October 16th, 2023. As I'm recording this video, the world is watching to see what's next in Gaza. Will there be a full Israeli ground invasion, as Netanyahu has called for? The Israel Defense Forces are massed on the border. They've been conducting continuous bombing attacks on Gaza. There's a stream of refugees from north to south as they've been warned to clear out. So there's a potential for a greater humanitarian disaster that's unfolding. And the world is watching. Now, the war hawks in Israel and in the West, US and NATO, seem to be gung-ho for an escalation, issuing threats against Iran, essentially guaranteeing full support for Israel. But we're seeing diplomatic efforts at the same time, worldwide diplomatic efforts coming from Russia, from China, from developing sector nations. But what do we have on, and actually then there was talk of a possible ceasefire. But we had this memo that was leaked from the State Department last week, which said that there must be no discussion of ceasefire or de-escalation from US diplomats. So as this is developing, the Saudis have broken off talks with Israel for normalizing relations. So there's still a number of shoes to drop in this situation. And it's extremely dangerous, not just for the people of Gaza and Israel, but for the world, as this is a cauldron which could blow up into another World War III. Now, on Saturday at the Manhattan Project weekly meeting, Dennis Speed and I discussed this at some length. We had some video clips of Lyndon LaRouche, important historic clips where he discussed how this region is a playground for the last century and a half of the British Empire and why it is. That this is an area where geopolitical manipulation is at the center of policy. And the purpose of this manipulation is to protect that region for the continued domination of the unipolar order. That is, to prevent an alliance of states for development which could move away from control by the financial and corporate cartels of the unipolar order. It's a classic example of the British divide and conquer strategy. So I urge you to watch the dialogue we had on Saturday. It will be linked in the description section of today's update. Now, let me emphasize two additional points. First, the whole question of the expansion of the BRICS and its relationship to this crisis. There's an ongoing Belt and Road Initiative conference in China commemorating that it was 10 years ago that Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road would be the center of China's policy for the investment in the development of other nations, of especially modern infrastructure. And at the BRICS conference in Johannesburg, South Africa, about 5 weeks ago, there was an expansion of the BRICS. But it's interesting, what are the countries that were involved in the expansion? 5 of them are in the region affected by this Israel operation. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Iran, and Ethiopia. And it could very well be that this expanding war is intended to divert attention from those nations from the consolidation of the BRICS, but also to disrupt the expansion. So this is not untypical of Western response when there's an alternative coming into existence, launch new wars. So we have to keep an eye on that. Now, at the same time, there's the IMF World Bank meeting in Marrakesh, Morocco. You may have heard something about it, but probably not. The central theme, and this is important for the American viewers, was warnings about the U.S. debt. They described the U.S. debt as, quote, the most worrying of all countries, unquote. That is, the U.S. debt crisis is the most dangerous in the world for the economy. And they're not only talking about government debt, which is now over $33 trillion. They brought up the growth of corporate defaults, in the auto sector, auto loans, credit card debt. And they said that the corporate defaults, that is, corporations, were the highest in August of this year of any month since 2009. This passes under the radar. People aren't aware of this. But what does it mean? Well, the default on credit card debt and auto loans is now 4 to 5% of loans are being defaulted on. So here's a question to think about. Who created the debt trap for the United States? It's the Federal Reserve. It's the central bankers internationally that used quantitative easing to increase the debt in order to cover the outstanding debt. An absolutely stupid policy which is coming back to haunt us. Now, the other aspect of this IMF World Bank Conference, excuse me, two other notable aspects to it. One was they issued a call for new infrastructure loans, which is not a bad idea, except they want it limited to sustainable projects, that is, green projects, which will not improve the situation in the developing sector one bit, but will add to the unsustainable debt because there's no efficiency in these projects. And most of these countries in the global south are orienting toward high-tech solutions such as nuclear, working with the Chinese and the Russians. Now, the other thing of note is that the Saudi foreign minister at the meeting in Morocco praised China for its investments in Africa. In other words, not a debt trap, but actually improving the economy in Africa. He said China stepped up when others shied away from Africa. This is part of the reason that the global south is turning away from the unipolar order, because the policies of the unipolar order benefit the billionaires and the corporate cartels, but not the sovereign nations of the global south. Now, what this means is we're now in an interim period between two paradigms. On the one side, you have the unipolar order, the rules-based order, which is declining and which is protected by war and is moving for new wars. The other side is the development of a new security and development architecture. And this is essentially along the lines that Lyndon LaRouche had urged going back to his International Development Bank proposal in 1975. So between these two paradigms, which way will humanity turn? Now, one ominous point here. The Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States just released its new report. And one of its central themes is the call for building new nuclear weapons and delivery systems for those nuclear weapons to be able to fight a nuclear war against both Russia and China. So when the West talks about the provocations from China and Russia, look at the congressional report. We're going to invest more and more money in weapon systems designed to fight a war that should never happen, because if it does happen, could lead to the obliteration of the human race. And the idea of being prepared to fight a war in order to prevent it, this is the old Kissinger mutual and assured destruction, or I should say the Herman Kahn mutual and assured destruction, which is the idea that if you blow up the world, then if you use nuclear weapons, we'll blow up the world, so don't use them. But what does it mean? Little wars all over the world. So where can we turn for sanity? To you, to the people who don't want to see our economies destroyed for building up a war capability for the benefit of a few and the destruction of the many. That's why you should join with us at the Schiller Institute, read our proposals, circulate them. Don't wait. We're losing time as you're sitting there contemplating whether or not you should do something. See you tomorrow.